We've got a curriculum today, my friends. Call this an extracurricular activity because we're going to be sweating. We're talking about Pyro today, which comes with a whole bunch of emotion. What I want to do today is take a look. We've got all kinds of videos here. We're going to take a look at the gradual development of Pyro. One of the nice parts about it taking so long is that we get a lot of insight into what's going on with it. And while we haven't heard much this year, for those of you who are kind of newcomers to Star Citizen now, we got a lot in the last few years. So what I want to do is go through a couple of the times they've talked about Pyro, the specifics that they've talked about it with, and look at the reasons this system actually might be different from Stanton, because Pyro is just more content, right? You might have heard that talking point before. It's just another area, another place with planets. It's not actually going to change the game that much unless they can make it different from Stanton in terms of the missions and NPCs and AI and laws and all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to get into the planets a little bit. I think I've got like an overview on the planets of Pyro, but we're going to be talking a lot about like the specific locations, the lore, the narrative, and what they want to do to differentiate it from Stanton. So here's the first time Chris kind of mentions Pyro and insinuates that that's where we're going.
And right, and that little red, the red cluster you see up there is actually the Pyro system. So when we leave Stanton, that will be one of our destinations.
So he doesn't actually say that's going to be the next system, but he's like, hey, there's the Pyro system. That's where we're going to be going. It wasn't until 2019 when they finally were like, okay, we're going to do an actual teaser. And it was fake. All right. We can all, let's get that out of the way. This is fake. They made this specifically for the demo, which is a problem a lot of people have with CitizenCon. But let me show you what it was like, how they did it for anybody who wasn't there. This was the first time we really got
so we're at the jump point
a look at it.
To the Pyro system. Now, you don't necessarily need infrastructure for jump points, but the more traveled ones are the ones that used to be traveled, which Pyro used to be, but not particularly anymore, have what we call jump rings around them, and they help stabilize the jump point to make for a smoother jump. If you don't have one, then it's more difficult, and the entrance is harder or difficult. But sometimes you may want to try a sort of side jump point to get into a system, like if you're a smuggler, because the main ones would be more, essentially they are like a checkpoint. It's like going through a border patrol or something.
It is basically a port. So when we're building the solar system, one of the things that we think about are entrances for obviously economy reasons, and you saw that with Tony Z's talk of way to interject new things into the solar system. So around the Stanton jump points, the three major ones, we will have space stations, so that you can go and travel. And let's say you had a long jump point and want to stop and basically drop something off there, you can. Refuel, or do whatever you need to do. So we will have space stations around those jump points that you can go and interact with. Now, obviously, when you go into a little bit more lawless system, I don't want to say like building a wall.
Yeah. Well, in the case of Pyro, it used to be a regulated system.
Yes.
That once they strip mined it out, no one goes there anymore, and it's fallen sort of into a lawless state.
Yes.
And so this is not really this isn't a very often traveled jump point, but we're going to take it because that's where we have to go to.
So one of the big details that has changed since this is that while they have, they ran into a problem with jump points. Jump points are naturally occurring phenomena, but what they felt like happened after this demo was a lot of people started to assume that jump points were being created by humans or being channeled by humans, which they can. Like he said, these rings can help to stabilize them. They can be unstable, they can collapse. That will be part of exploration gameplay, is finding new entrances after a jump point might collapse or become unstable. But they started to diverge from this idea of even the more stable jump points having these sort of rings around them, because it gave the wrong impression to people. So that's something that we'll start to see throughout this as we move forward through these different videos today, how jump points have changed. In fact, after this, we'll do a video specifically talking about jump points. So I'm actually going to skip the jumping here. We'll look in we'll look at them go into the jump, but we're going to jump to We're going to skip to when they're actually in Pyro and go from there. Just we have a limited amount of time today.
Let's do it. That's actually a super cool view.
That frame rate, though.
How good that is. That looks awesome. Okay.
Oh, yes, that frame rate. So the
Going through a wormhole is a little bit like riding the rapids.
honestly, it looks like you're getting swallowed. I'm not gonna lie. It looks a little bit like I'm inside of a body, and I'm guessing they probably changed that up a little bit. But believe it or not, this concept of what it looks like is super close to what they proposed as a concept all the way back in like 2014, 2015. So they've always kind of stuck with the same idea. Now we're gonna jump forward into the Pyro system here, just to see kind of the first visual ideas of what it was. Again, this is not the actual Pyro system. They just created some object container for this demo specifically.
System, and we streamed out Stanton as we were traveling and streamed in Pyro.
No, you didn't.
The other side, by the way, has got an awesome light on the side. Yeah.
Sam.
Sam!
Set
What
a route to the ruin station, Sam.
I always love the directing they do on the mic.
There we go.
There we go.
All right, Ian. Hit it.
Oh, was that our first teaser of Quantum Boost? Because you can't do that in game. So that was the first. That was more of a visual insight into. Oh, they have Carricks on their shirts. That's nice. That was more of a visual insight into what they wanted to do with the system. It wasn't exactly how it works, and that's not exactly how it's going to look like. This is the original. You can see in the distance here. That's the original concept for Ruined Station. That's actually what's on the thumbnail for this stream on YouTube. But this isn't what they're going to do with Ruined Station. In fact, now that I think about it, Ruined Station shouldn't even be this close to the jump point. I don't think the jump point would be anywhere near... What is it, Pyro 5? Ruined Station is around? I don't know, we'll get to that later. But anyways, that was our first look at Pyro. Didn't really tell you much. Gave the idea that it's lawless, it's dangerous, it's a little more edgy, I guess. But now we jump forward into actually, is this after or before December? Oh, this is actually right around. Okay, this is after CitizenCon, before they made it live on YouTube. Here is a Inside Star Citizen about jump points. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, but I think they do that. We will get some insight into how they work here.
Like wormholes and jump points. Some previs was done, I think, back in 2014, 2015. A lot of early concepts went out to Chris. I was working with Marcel on the concept side of things. So we've done a lot of loose investigations first to understand, do we want something big, do we want something that's small, does it fit into the lore of SC? There's several things that you can play with, such as, is it spherical, is it cylindrical, is it square? The very kind of like core shapes that you can kind of play with, and then how that thing would operate, how you'd enter it, what's it look like to the third person as well as the first person. So just to get those ideas out there, and then several iterations for weeks, right? And then we kind of like settled on what you kind of saw in the demo.
Y'all see this man's shirt? Yes! I want it.
iterations for weeks, right? And then we kind of like settled on what you kind of saw in the demo.
So kind of like it's a really good opportunity for me to now show you some of the content live in the editor, maybe run through some of the processes that we went through to build this content, and just speak a little bit about our processes. This is the Stanton location, but it isn't just confined to one area as well. Like the cool thing is that I don't know if you noticed from the demo, but we arrived at the edge of a nebula. This is all contained in the same scene, so I can zoom out of this location now.
Holy crap, I forget how big they are.
Jeez. You can see again, this is fully volumetric, so the approach for this is using the gas cloud tech that's been developed. I mean, it's been developed specifically for the coil, but the more that we've developed with it, the more that we've realised that we can actually start to build entire space scenes with this. And for the persistent universe, obviously, it's less of a linear experience than it is for Squadron 42, because with Squadron 42 we know the exact location that will bring players into these spacescapes, and we'll know how we're going to direct the player into them. When we're building content for the persistent universe, it needs to be a little bit more 360 than that. It needs to be a bit more flexible, so you can see from this gas cloud that we've got here, we can pretty much move it to any position.
He makes an interesting point there. I feel like Squadron 42, despite how long it's taken, is going to have a lot of things that could break if you approach them like Star Citizen, you know? Even though it's using the same engine, it feels like they're probably constructing it to be a guided experience. You know, you can't like go around to another side of something because it might not work out the same way. At least that's what it sounds like he's saying.
Like this, with this volumetric tech, we do use a little bit of Houdini to kind of generate this content. And I can show you, this is obviously this is a combination of various different elements. We've had a lot of internal tools developed by the VFX tech team, who have built what we call CIG cloud tools. They build the CIG cloud tools to be able to basically turn geometry into gas cloud. So with this kind of like shape that you see here, this has all been built out of geometry, out of my own preference. I've built this in 3ds Max, but really you can build this in Houdini as well. And then we're able to almost sculpt environments with geometry and then turn it into the gas cloud afterwards.
Space barf? Ew. Ugh.
So I can just quickly boot up the actual wormhole itself. This is it's a separate scene. Actually, in the game, it's part of an object container, so we stream this in. We've had like a new entity built. I don't know a great deal about the entity.
Oh, I guess technically they might have actually. Maybe they did actually stream those sections in the demo, if they just had them as object containers rather than different servers. I may have been wrong about that.
It's a new system, and even myself working on this every single day, that still blows my mind. I'm still kind of completely taken aback by the technology that we're able to kind of bring with this game. We had Ben Parry, who's one of the graphics engineers in the UK, come in and build us a brand new shader.
There's already a shader that the VFX team has used that's mostly for doing kind of like where you would use a particle effect, but you don't want to have one.
I'm pretty sure one of these guys that we're seeing is the same person who came in to work on global illumination in the last couple months for this game.
What we actually did was combine that with a more traditional shader that could do lighting and opaque geometry and that kind of thing, and then threw all that in front of Jake, and he picked out which bits he was actually going to use. So then we just deleted out all the bits that we didn't want to use and then started specializing different parts of it to get the kind of details that he wanted out of it.
You just kind of fly through it and you can see some of the kind of variations that we have to the tunnels. And this is all real time in the engine as well. Like we're kind of, again, we're not faking anything here. This is all kind of constructed, and you can see there's lots of kind of cool variations.
You can tell from the frames they're not faking
We
it.
never actually go down these routes, but conversations that we had with design very early on, with Tobias in design, we were saying, okay, well, we have the capability with the technology that we have to build secondary routes. Do you want them in? And he was like, yeah, cool, put them in. We might not go down them, but we've got them and we can explore them if we need to.
What?
So it's good to know that in the future that we'll hopefully have kind of branching paths and the opportunity to go to different locations.
Okay, so that's another interesting complication. I don't know if that refers to the same thing, but there is a fact that, because it is a worry, right, that people are just going to camp. I think actually somebody just asked, the Rajax, you just asked if there's going to be security at these gates. It's a concern, obviously, that pirates and people are going to camp out at gates and just gank everybody as soon as they come out of a jump point in a new system. They have this, they call it the Swiss cheese formula where you might enter a jump point from one place, but you can get spit out in the next system across, let's say, an area of 2 million kilometers. So somebody can't just sit there with an interdiction bubble and catch every person that comes through, because somebody might be jumping out over there, somebody might be jumping out over there, somebody's back here, you know? So it's a good strategy. I don't know if this is involved with it, these secondary paths, but something to know about jump points.
Here. So you can see from here, like the deformation of the surface has, we had vertex deformation in the engine before, but the vertex deformation that we had, the vertex deformation, by the way, is driving the kind of, I suppose, the animation on the surface of this thing. The vertex deformation we had in previous shader work was very uniform, and we couldn't get any variation or displacement to the way that that kind of animates on the surface. So something that Ben put into the shader with it for us was the ability to put variation in that deformation, so we could get this kind of like otherworldly feel to it.
All right, so that's jump points. Again, I don't want to sit too long on any one thing except for some of the more narrative stuff back here, because there's a lot of important stuff for us to get through with limited time today. So we're going to move forward now to the very first times we started to see the art that would go into making the Pyro space star system. This is, I think, possibly some of our very first looks at the stuff, even inside Star Citizen, because right now all you've seen, right, is the jump point and stuff. Now they start to talk about the planets. Let's see what they have to say about them.
Speaking of pyromaniacs and what might be the best or worst segue I've made all season, it's time for another look at early work on the planets of the Pyro system. In
sorry.
this case, Pyro.
Okay, so this isn't the first time. One of the first times.
Pyro 2. Now, in the original galactic guide for the Pyro system, Pyro 2 was said to be a coreless planet that once held significant mineral deposits and became the victim of a metal rush that quickly picked the planet clean, leaving it little more than an empty husk. And, well, we may have to revisit that assessment before all is said and done. Similar to our look at Pyro 1 last month, this is early work on the planet's surface alone, so you can expect plenty of changes and improvements along the way before it gets plopped into the Pyro system with its family of other planets. But it's fun to showcase what Planetech V4 can cook up in a new world's very early days.
Yeah, this is actually going to be really interesting. Now that we've seen this, it's going to be interesting to see what this looks like in probably 30 minutes or so. We're going to see the more finalized version of this, and it's good. It looks good. But this is kind of what the stuff was looking like back in the first couple of days of development of this system. From there, we also started to hear about points of interest. So we've seen these outposts in development since 2020 now, and we still don't have them. But we know they're coming with Pyro. We know they're going to be pretty big compared to the outposts we have right now. Unlike, honestly, most assets, even in Star Citizen, we've gotten to see them from the very, very, very first stage of literally just their drawings on paper to now we see them in-game engine with players and NPCs walking around them. So I think this was a really cool process. We actually went over these locations in another video, another stream a couple months ago. But this is a big part of Pyro, so I thought I'd include it in here.
Returning down planetside, early concept explorations are underway on the creation of homesteads, habitats and homes for NPCs that may one day dot across the surface of planets and moons throughout the Stanton system and beyond. Now, these thumbnail sketches are an invaluable first step in any concept process, and as usual, they're explorations only. That means that while several of them may be chosen to make the next step into full-on development,
I love some of these designs.
The reality is that many of these may die here as solid examples of simply what we don't want to do. Such is the way for thumbnail sketches.
One of my favorite parts about Star Citizen is actually something that came up in the podcast this week. For those who haven't seen it, I brought the pilot on to talk about Star Citizen. He is a content creator who actually did a lot of content for Elite Dangerous. And what I didn't realize was back when he first started doing content, he explained this in the podcast, but his introduction to Star Citizen was that it was a terrible project. It was like a scam, and it was just not great. But he slowly opened up to it, really enjoyed it, eventually made the switch from Elite Dangerous over to Star Citizen, and then got hired by the company and started working there. So he has a lot of interesting insight into this stuff. But one of the things that came up in our conversation was how CIG will allow people to come into the company and take the ideas they have, the concepts they have, and expand them into things that other game studios can't afford to do because of a deadline, because of the scale, the scope, just not wanting to get too out of hand. And while that has some bad and good effects for Star Citizen, I think one of my favorite things is just getting to see somebody that I, clearly is a big fan of old day kind of sci-fi and Star Wars kind of stuff, just like throwing what they've got at the wall and being like, let's go with this, let's make this happen, even if it might be a little more difficult or might be a little ways out of there. I like that they took these crazy designs and were able to distill them down into something that would be really interesting for us in game. Love to see it. There's no other game where I've gotten to get like just this excited about a building,
Lastly, team members are also exploring the creation of gigantic rock formations that can be used in multiple locations, including the upcoming planets of the Pyro system. Now this test here is specifically about structure and scale, tech and process, more than the specific texture stuff you see here. Now looking at them, I can't help personally but think not only about how they'll improve the look of our planets and moons, but what these will mean for player-run events like the Daymar Rally and the like. Can I say it? Now this is pod racing. Don't sue me.
Honestly, I'm looking forward. We're gonna see these. I was really excited for these. I thought we were gonna get these sooner. I thought these would be in Stanton, but they're in Pyro, and we will see here in a little bit where these will be applied on planets, and they look really fun. I'm betting Atmo and SCR and like the different racing communities are gonna make racetracks that implement these big rock arches. They're really cool. I love the large geographic features in a game. That scale is second to none.
Speaking of which, it's been a while since we've checked in on the team's progress, so here's a look at some explorations currently underway on one of the moons orbiting Pyro 5. Now, these explorations are typically done to see how far we can push current tech and asset packs before anyone goes and makes something new that may or may not be needed. And what you're seeing here is a second pass exploration like that. Now after the initial round of feedback, there was a feeling amongst the team here that it seemed a little too much like Red Daymar, which is understandable as early work in this phase is done expressly with existing asset libraries and tech. So the specific efforts of this second pass here were a push to bring out more of the dried, crumbly volcanic aspects of the moon's surface, while adding a few new additions to the asset library here and there. Now, once the new painting tool improvements have finished their trial runs on Stan's existing planets and moons this quarter, and been put through the paces by players in the upcoming Alpha 311, and after first passes have been completed on all the other planets and moons of the Pyro system, the team will return to this moon and continue to push it in new and exciting ways. Even in these early states, you can bet we'll be back to check in on its continued evolution as it makes its way into the Star Citizen persistent universe.
Oh, we got one more update. Drawings.
Finally, several weeks ago, we showcased some initial concept explorations for homesteads, frontier housing to be found out in the wilderness areas of undeveloped planets and moons, and there were a lot to choose from. So the next step has been to turn some of those 2D sketches that we really liked into 3D sketches in Blender, to further explore the shape language, to see these things from as many different angles as possible, and to begin to build out a library of kitbash options for us to play with. At this stage, one of the main things we're looking for in fleshing out this colonial architectural vibe visually is that it looks like it can survive in many different climates, perhaps with a patching motif that indicates generations of use instead of the outright replacement of components that could keep them looking newer. As far as shape language, these efforts will also be used to help us land on a specific direction of cubical, conical, spherical, or some mix therein. Like most concepts, these visual explorations are just as important in figuring out what we do want as determining what we do not. Also under consideration are the materials that would be used to make these structures, as there's a desire within the team here to make the materials found in the walls or rooftops appear as if they were sourced from the planet where any homestead is found whenever possible. Overall, this is one of the most enjoyable periods for any concept artist. A time where it's more about exploring primitive forms and building shape relationships between core elements, researching traversal options and how they'll settle within the environment around them, and perhaps most importantly, working hand in hand with system designers to identify all the necessary gameplay components and the relational hierarchy necessary between them, so that when development of this feature really kicks into high gear, we'll all be creating something from the ground up that can build upon and utilize the full complexity of the resource generation and item control system we discussed last quarter on Calling All Devs that is currently in development for ships, vehicles, and space stations alike.
I really like the vibes of these. People calling out Star Wars vibes, definitely. I mean, you can see it. And that may be a coincidence, it might not. I could care less. Like I said, the thing I love most about this project is that you get a bunch of sci-fi devs in there and they just throw ideas in there and they're like, yeah, this looks good. I like this. This works. And they go through the process of making sure it actually makes sense architecturally, but they have some fun with it. That's what I want, you know? Video games are fun. Have some fun, but also deliver the fun. I think it was a really good idea for them to connect these with Pyro because these are assets that obviously we need in Stanton and different areas. But they're coming first to Pyro, which means you can build more hype by showing these and saying they're coming with Pyro. That could be a coincidence, it might not, but I do think that these are a very good development, and they're going to definitely set those outposts apart from the ones we have in Stanton, which are just like a single building. Let's jump into lore of Pyro. This is actually some interesting stuff. This is mainly talking about the gangs of Pyro, which there are a few. We know one of them being Xeno Threat. But this guy is one of the main writers here for the game, and he has some interesting stuff to say about it.
Though there's been kind of recent renewed interest.
And this is important because, yeah, this might not be physical in-game stuff, but this is the stuff that is going to differentiate Pyro from Stanton. The stuff that he's talking about is stuff that's going to make AI react differently to you. It's going to make space stations react differently to you. It's going to make the law something that you don't understand when you leave Stanton and go to Pyro.
With Stanton Pyro Jumppoint being discovered fairly recently after the discovery of Stanton, so that all of a sudden with the Stanton becoming such an important system of commerce, it's a much shorter route to get to Terra from Stanton to cut through Pyro, where no one recommends it, but you have people who are willing to do the shortcut, which is introducing a lot more heightened criminal activity into the system. So
yeah, you can't deny that it's definitely the convenience is there. So
we got a couple different planets here, 6 of them that are all various stages of nasty and worked over. But the kind of beating heart of the system is Ruin Station, which was the kind of initial heart of Pyrotechnic Amalgamated way back in the day, and now it's seen as the main criminal hub in the system. It's being run by an outlaw group that you may be familiar with if you want to talk about them more, Dave.
Yeah. So, I mean, also just as a backstory too, I mean, one of the things that we sort of say in our usual, whenever a system's discovered, kind of the process that people usually go through is that the first station that they build in the system is usually nearest the jump point that through which it's discovered, and they use that as sort of like a launching point hub for prospectors to come in and kind of assess the system and stuff like that. So Ruin Station is meant to be that original station, so kind of an old, depleted, kind of terrible place that is still in operation, but now is being sort of fought over by various gang entities and tends to be sort of the seat of power. So right now, the current rulers of it are Xeno Threat, who some of you tangled with in Stanton system not too long ago. So they are kind of the reigning power for the moment, at least, on Ruin Station. So they're kind of operating out of there. And Xeno Threat, for those unfamiliar, are basically kind of a group of ultra-violent kind of a mishmash of sort of outlaws and ex-military who are sort of zealots for anti-UEE, anti-corporate, anti-alien type ideology. So they basically, their target has been the Stanton system. They basically kind of went there with this sort of idea of like, we're showing up as liberators. You all are under the sway and control of corporate masters who run the government and aliens who are trying to subvert humanity and blah, 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 blah. And we're here to free you and, fight back against them, blah, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, we fought back. So we managed to knock them out of the system, and they went back into Pyro to ruin station, presumably, and to presumably hatch further, nefarious plans.
Just go sit quietly and hate aliens.
Yeah. They're just kicking rocks and looking really sullen.
So the Xeno Threat is a good example of one of the main known outlaw.
Yeah, we know all about Xeno Threat.
And so as we're
show me somebody else.
If you're a subscriber, then you will recognize some of the armors that have been released called that kind of mimic the look of one of the gangs currently running around Pyro by the name of the Overlords. And they're no one's quite sure what their ultimate goal in Pyro is. They have a vigilante kind of aesthetic to them, where they're hunting other criminal gangs in the system, trying to take them out or mess with them. There's various rumors as to whether they're trying to essentially become the predominant gang in Pyro by just taking out the other ones, or whether there's even some theories that they might be, special ops from the UEE team that's come in covertly as a way to help clear up the system. So it's a little up in the air right now, where as to their ultimate intentions, but they're definitely
badasses.
Badasses. They're very good at what they do, and they are not afraid to shoot first and ask questions later. I
don't know. That guy's giving me the peace sign.
Basically leaned into this aesthetic and basically copied their armor and are now selling it to people in various shades, which represent some of the lieutenants of the gang that are out there and are kind of like known, which you can see Switchback and Predator and Stinger and Riptide are kind of the names they've given themselves. And as a subscriber, you may have some combo of these armors that you'll be able to wear. So yeah, well, we
the Brits.
Some kind of like lore behind the gang. It was also mentioned briefly in a Jump Point story called Dying Star about.
Wait, really? It's the way that you show your hand defines what it means? I didn't even know that. Look at me. Learning new stuff. I love you, chat. Thank you. Let's jump forward to the fire rats, because they're actually very interesting. They're a little bit crazy. There's a lot of lore behind the fire rats. Apparently they have, one of the planets has this cave system of networks where they get this weird noise. For those who don't know, the Pyro star is unstable. It lets out these bursts of energy that go across the system and can damage unprotected people and ships. And one of the cave systems on one of the planets reacts to these bursts of energies and makes this weird noise. And one of the gangs in there, the fire rats, actually a lot of people in this system, believe them to be actual, like, they call it the ghost of Pyro. And they think it is this voice that speaks to you and tells you what to do. Almost, God, I don't even have the word for it, but like godlike, right? Like it defines who runs the system, who controls the power. They will literally follow what people think they heard in that cave because they think it is truth. So they do like this whole pilgrimage to the cave and all this stuff. There's a ton of lore behind this gang, and it's really interesting. I don't know if they actually touch on them here. Let's see. Yeah, here they are talking about the fire rats a little bit.
We built it out, but maybe that sort of wild and crazy, no patience, short fuse, capricious, not insane. That can be, number one. So that's one take on it, where they're.
Yeah, prophet of Pyro. Sorry.
Again, like that sort of hair trigger temper type thing. They will annihilate people if they cross them, or if you are, if you violate their code,
Hey, piss poor Pete.
mess you up.
Good to see you in here.
But
so that's one. Capricious, not insane. That's one.
mhm.
Thank you for the history lesson, by the way. I didn't know that.
I mean, I keep coming back to like the fire rats and the name of it, of like. And again, this butts into what our design capabilities are to get this into gameplay, but the idea of fire as a weapon that they use, like burning the inside of the ship out as a way to get rid of the people on board, and like because they care about the hull and fixing it up and like that kind of stuff, so they can vent the fire out once they're gone. But it's really about like forcing you to open it up. But I don't know exactly how we're going to cause fires aboard ship purposefully. I know they're supposed to trigger when you overload stuff, and from what I've seen, there's some really cool things that might be able to be happening with fire. But
Sounds like a leak.
as far as like remotely being able to trigger fires aboard ships, I don't know if that's something that's capable
Hacking
of
and
90%.
disabling the fire suppression systems.
Yeah, something like
I mean,
that.
it's
But that might be
interesting
too complicated.
because but it could also be that thing too, where it's like it could be a weird spin of like not killing people themselves. It's that sort of like, well, we didn't kill them, the fire did, type thing. Like they use fire as, again, it's like you said, kind of a cleansing wash thing, and they can just set a fire and then like put their hands
Cleanse
over their ears and the
yourself.
flames go away.
Witness me. So that's, sorry if I just blew your ears out. So that's just a little bit of insight. This is a full hour talk about the gangs of Pyro. And that's important because unlike in the Stanton system, Pyro is controlled by gangs, and that's not insignificant. The companies, it's not even a government, right? It's literally companies in Stanton make the laws, decide what you can and can't have, decide where you can and can't go, all these different things. In Pyro, though, it's all gangs. And like, if they do it well, we don't know that much about how it's going to work. But if they do it well, it should be a tangible notice or a tangible difference between walking up to Crusader Security, getting a job, and going and committing it versus walking up to fire rats. They should be building suspense. They should be building these more dangerous, kind of not super friendly looking locations where you're going in here, you're finding some gang members. Think of, here's a good one. The mission they used in Cyberpunk for their kind of marketing was when you have to go into this meat packing facility and meet with the leader of Maelstrom. And it's like, you go there and you're not fighting, but you're also not feeling safe. It feels a little dangerous. It feels like they're intimidating you. You're on edge. Anything can happen. And in my opinion, this isn't necessarily something they've said outright, but it's something that I think they're getting at with all of these kinds of looks into the narrative and lore of the system. That's how it should be in Pyro. Yeah, you're working there, you are getting things done, but you're always kind of looking over your shoulder. You're a little bit on edge because everybody there is there for specific reasons, and you don't want to step on those reasons for the worry that they might step on you. So when you look at the locations that we're going to be going to get these missions, you can kind of see that broken down, sort of less kept up vibe of Stanton is going to drive a lot of our interactions. These space stations and these different outposts look a lot different from Stanton. Now, the next video we have here, this is stepping into 2021. So what we've been looking at was 2020, 2019, generally early stuff. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of art involved. It was mainly, I guess there was a little bit of art going on back here. Oh, we skipped this. Let me show you guys this first. But we're going to step here pretty soon into 2021, which is a lot more of the hype building phase for Pyro. Probably premature hype, but hype nonetheless, where they get a lot more art assets in there and they dive a lot deeper into stuff. But here's some of that ground location development we were looking at before. It was just drawings on pages in 2D. Now they've got it kind of constructed in game, and you can see what they're going for with these outposts compared to the single building outposts we have in Stanton.
Finally, if you've been watching ISC Weekly, you've seen that we've been following along with the continuing evolution of our colonial homesteads intended to be found throughout the persistent universe. And in our last sprint report of the year, let's go ahead and take a look at just one of the earliest internal white box layouts for a communal module. Now, is this a bar, a hab, a kitchen, an activities hall? We don't know yet. That's part of the fun of game development. Because these homesteads are meant for the far-reaching frontier areas of something like Pyro, the team is exploring things like storm shutters to protect from the elements outside, as well as vertical traversal options to allow players to get wherever they need to go for a variety of gameplay opportunities. Overall, these homesteads are still in an exploration phase and haven't fully entered production just yet. But homesteads like these are just chock full of potential in what they can add to the overall Star Citizen experience.
All right, so this was like when things really started to pick up, and you can tell by how polished this video is. I think this video is probably going to get me a copyright claim, but we're going to go with it anyways. And then from here, we're going to look at the very first demo that actually takes place on a Pyro Planet, which shows them kind of getting a little more into bringing all this stuff we've been seeing together in one place. Let's take a look at this for now. Okay, so that was a just a short look, kind of just a little hype reel. I think we actually have another one in here somewhere. If that wasn't the one that gets me a copyright strike, then this one definitely will. Not a strike, but a warning. This one definitely will. And I think this one's actually more interesting. Let's see. Ooh, that slow crossfade. God, I wish the hovercrafts made that noise. Ooh, somebody's not using their VTOL. All right, so that was another little scissor reel they did, and then now we've got the actual demo. This is going to be the first time we really see all of the Pyro stuff kind of come together. And again, this is still relatively early. I mean, this is 2021. They whipped this out to kind of build hype, but the planets really weren't anywhere near complete just yet. We do get some good insight into their plans, but none of the stuff in this video, I think, really does a good job of showing how the system will actually be different. That's what we're going to see a little bit later with the space stations, with some more narrative stuff, and then finally we'll touch on the planets and the underground facilities that are coming in there. But one of the big things that somebody mentioned in chat here that's different with Pyro from Stanton is that Pyro is like 3 times larger than Stanton. Take you 10 minutes to fly across Stanton right now. It's going to take you half an hour to fly across Pyro. And that does sound terrible in the way that the game works right now, but you kind of have to remember that they can't make the system small now and then expand them later. So if they want to have a game where all locations are very localized, they kind of have to do that now. And what I mean by that is eventually you're supposed to get enough gameplay around a single planet to stay there for your full session, for your full day, your full week. You shouldn't be going back and forth between places quantum jumping multiple times a day. It's supposed to waste your time. That's supposed to be something that is a large enough time commitment that you don't want to do it, because then it encourages you to stay around planets. So when you go to Pyro, it's going to be even worse. There's less space stations, there's more space, and it's more dangerous. It's supposed to be a place where you're not exactly feeling that safe going. And one of the things somebody mentioned was those less space stations making a bigger deal. So here is this demo. I'm going to probably skip through this a little bit just to give you guys the full show here, but you'll get to see some of what kind of a mission will look like. It's not that much different from what it is right now. Mainly, I think the cool thing to see here is the planet, the outpost, and just the new assets.
Run with a smaller crew. So this is the captain's quarters, and then we'll go out and see a little bit more of the habitation deck, and then make our way to the cockpit. So this would be the social area that you can meet and eat and basically plan your next mission. And then from here we'll go to the cockpit. So here we're over Pyro 3. We've come here for a mission to acquire an artifact. And you'll be making your way down to a trading post. So wanted to just give you a quick overview, and then we can start talking about the planet.
Yeah, Pyro 3 is just a terrestrial planet. It has a very thin, breathable atmosphere, but it's still pretty inhospitable, very cold. As you can see, some of those lightning strikes in the clouds, but yeah, very, very pretty looking.
So this is the first time we're actually seeing clouds above a terrestrial planet. You know, we went through quite a few iterations of forms. What we ultimately ended upon was something that felt quite dramatic, still believable in terms of how the wind would have shaped them. But yeah, it's showcasing a lot of the more recent tech that came online. Also, what we're seeing here is like some kind of distant thunder strikes. And what this is kind of like a prelude to, you know, future weather features that will be coming on board, you know, and how this will tie into, you know, storms and ship handling, you know, due to the turbulence. And it's great seeing the, you know, the rain hit the canopy glass here, you know, when you go through these cloud banks. Also, as part of the process of shaping, one of the things we really wanted to do is create these kind of like these pockets in between the clouds. So you're in these cavities, so as you're flying through, you get glimpses of the terrain beneath you. But you know, it feels really quite exhilarating, you know, to fly through. Also, as well, like it's showcasing a lot of the more recent tech coming on board as well. So, you know, it's a lot of optimizations been going on. So it's way more performant than previously it was. Also, like the level of artifacting that we're seeing here is substantially reduced, certainly on higher spec machines.
I'm glad we're finally starting to see clouds like this on ArcCorp. I don't know when they're going to come to the rest of the planets, but it was cool to see this actually be a thing. I was disappointed that we didn't get these kind of clouds shortly after this demo, but at least they're here now.
The cheese with cloud sandwich. So as we get out of the cheese, another really big feature that was important for me was terrain shadowing and terrain occlusion from the clouds. So you're actually seeing these large areas of occlusion cast onto the terrain. It just adds that depth. It just adds that believability to what we're seeing in the frame. And when you see like these dark overcast clouds in the hovering above the mountains, it finally completes the frame, especially when you see these distant rumbles of thunder in the distance.
So James Cameron, who's doing the run through, yes, that is his name. He will be taking us down to the outpost.
Took a break from Avatar to come do a demo for Star Citizen.
Basically make 50 of these, whether they're inhabited or derelicts or even basically inhabited by a farmer or inhabited by a gang. So the goal is to have these act as different factions, and so that you can develop different rep associated with them, and you can start seeing how big these outposts stretch to with the comms tower that's behind us, and then even some of the AA turrets that you'll actually see up close and personal.
God, I love this landing. So you can see these outposts are definitely a lot bigger than the ones in Stanton. Multiple buildings, they've got AA turrets, they've got communications. You'll also throughout this video see some... Hold on, let's listen to the sound effects. I love this.
That was a really good approach from James.
Hydraulic noises, yes!
Good, solid
you'll see some of the engineering components, like the boxes that have circuits on them, the solar panels, and other things that will also be functional, because engineering gameplay is not just for ships, it's also going to be included in these kinds of outposts here.
We'll go down to the technical deck. Show off the cargo area as well as the climate-controlled component areas, and then onto the gravity generator room and the stairway out. So you'll be able to learn more about the ship in one of the later panels that we have with Ben, Paul, and John. I think the team did a great job on this. I think this is one of my favorite skins. Yeah.
Yeah, they did a new skin, just something that felt a lot more, suitable for Pyro. But you can see how it feels suitably worn and weathered, to fit into these climates. And what we're seeing here is first boots on the ground, on Pyro. I think it looks great, especially in contrast to what we're seeing here is like actual AI on the terrain, walking about, going about their business. And is that an AA turret?
Surprisingly, this was actually the AI walking around on planets was something that actually ended up getting into the game. I don't know, probably I think 6 months after this. And while it's not as widespread as I think it should be, they really, 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 really need to get the AI moving around in more locations. I was glad that at least it didn't take another 2 years for us to get it. Waffle Insanity and Tyrus, I see you join GII over here, dropping 5 gifted subs on the stream. Thank you so much for the support, mate. Thanks for getting more folks in GII and more folks in the membership club over on YouTube. Get that exclusive videos, folks.
And radio comms towers and all these other elements that we want to make sure that are interactive for the player and allows them to go and explore or use to their advantage. We want them to be able to interact with these different items.
Here you can see like various outpost modules. To the right there, we've got the garage unit. You can see the infrastructure on the roof. But this large, beautiful, archway here kind of signifies, the main entrance, the primary entrance to the main social module. I think the airlocks look great. Fits in with the art style beautifully.
The team did a great job on this.
And then we've seen the concept art previously in the day, and then here you can see it translated in game, and I think it absolutely looks fantastic. The radial forms, is quite special to this art style, and you can see how that complements these archways that lead into other areas of the outpost.
So these are those same outposts that we were seeing in drawing, and then we saw them kind of in that 3D format and in early development. Now this is more kind of final art, what they're supposed to look like when we finally get the system.
Actually protecting their investments, protecting their home from strangers, and then but you have good rep with them, and so they allow you to kind of enter into certain areas that the other players wouldn't be able to enter into.
We also got a quick shot at the loadout that James is playing. So it's a female loadout, but it's also showing the backpack, which is new. Also some of the new hair as well, which is rendering much nicer.
Oh yeah, I guess that. The backpack, this is actually, come to think of it, this demo is probably the best they did at bringing features from a CitizenCon demo into the game. Because I think shortly after this, we did also get backpacks and inventory and looting like they'll show here, which I will admit, CitizenCon demos in the past, it took a while to get to the point. Like, we still haven't gotten the data heist mission from Microtech in 2019. They did better with this one. It's still not perfect, but better.
Go see the dealer, acquire the artifacts.
And for the trading post, we wanted to get all of the junk on the outside as well, so the player can see it as they're approaching. We wanted, as many tops as we could, and you can see it's using the new soft deck shader, so these are reacting to the planetary wind, the same force that the tall grass and the moss on the ground is reacting to as well.
The other thing with the trading post is, like Ian spoke about before, the inventory and what they'll be able to actually sell here will vary depending on where they're at in the solar system. Are they close to a jump point where they might be coming down and using this as a chop shop, or are they in a very rural area that's, they care more about the frontier lifestyle and being able to survive versus money?
We passed the kitchen as well on the way back there. That's the local diner for this outpost. Tough crowd. Also, so in the inside as well, we wanted this, kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. Like it's just literally the dealers displaying all the wares, everything they'll have outside in the open here.
Well, welcome. Take a look. I'm sure I have what you want, and if not, I'll have something just as good.
Dude, where's the small talk? Butter me up, man. Ask me about my trip.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very good choice. Very good.
So after 5 million credits of disposable,
Is that a baseball
income, we
bat?
get our first look at the Hadesian artifact, which is obviously going to be what is sort of a super rare thing that you'll hopefully be able to start finding in the galaxy.
I think this also ended up in game, right? You can find this in the game shortly after this demo.
This was an old civilization that destroyed itself.
I think just pieces of it.
How this trader has gotten their hands on this artifact.
Oh, and that bush there, that's in game.
So here we're showing one way of actually playing through
That's a joke.
this area. It really depends on your standings within the gang and how they want to deal with it.
So they do a little bit of talking. We're going to skip forward to another version of that same mission. They kind of show, I guess. This is more to show, I don't know, AI reactiveness, supposedly.
the trading post. This is a little bit more straightforward versus in Demo 1, we took a side route through the social area.
So yeah, this is just some additional warehouse space.
Actually, because this is basically the same thing, we're going to go to the last scenario, which shows a little bit of a different situation, stealth looting and other stuff like that.
Before. Also, what we're seeing here is like something to imply at the frontier living. You know, maybe they're growing crops or vegetables out here, but it also gives a kind of like a soft cover approach to the perimeter of the base. Nice.
Also, with it being a different time of day, this allows us to show off the AI having their 24-hour schedules so that they can be in different areas when you approach it. So if you approach it at night or you approach it during the morning, you know, they'll be doing different things, whatever is valid for their schedule.
That door's locked, so there's no going through that way. But what James does actually see here as he's scouting out the next AI is, you know, just checking the roofline. But as I said previously, we wanted as many kind of like views in to the base as possible. You know, just so the player can continue to keep context of what's inside.
But also when you're inside, it allows the player to have context of where they're at within the actual outpost. And that was a great shot.
The AI fell beautifully on the already called out beautiful yellow grass and moss. Also,
the artifact is just a valuable thing to collect.
What he's doing is actually making a mental map of, you know, possible routes, possible advanced traversal routes on top of the outpost. And we saw the dealer there in the bedroom. Just end of the day.
So with each outpost, there'll be different routes that will be open to the player or closed to the player. So some of them might have ladders on the outside, some of them might not. Some of them might have basically ways to get in through the floorboards, other ones won't. But this is just one version of, you know, many possibilities. So here, the player will take a secondary route of navigation all the way up to the roof, and then from here, this allows them to be able to check out any of the AI.
So this is where we start to see some of the engineering aspects, things that were not built into the older outposts or locations really in general, that especially with Pyro, but also with some of the derelict locations we're seeing in Stanton, they're starting to include the pieces that will lead to that. So you can see solar panels here in the foreground. You can see a lot of conduits and wiring moving around. Those are meant to actually be real wiring. I mean, if you go to, let's see if I have footage of this. If you go to, God, do I not? I think I do. Yeah. So if you go to like the old video of, hold on, let me pause. So if you go to the old video of engineering gameplay, you can see that they're talking about relays and wiring between different components, power plants, turrets, weapons, lights, all that stuff. And they've talked a lot about how that works for ships. But if you look here, you can see that these solar panels are connected to the power lines, and they also have their own interactable little conduits here where you're going to be able to press buttons or insert something or maybe even hack it and do something to either continue power or cut power or whatever it might be. And they've hinted at this a little bit more. I mean, you could see somebody working on it here. They haven't really shown it that much. I think there's one video where I've seen them showing something like this. Let me see if I have it here.
Like right now, these are just kind of empty, and to just illustrate like a guard point. In the future, you know, these could be maybe customizable, or, you know, they could contain like an AA turret like we saw on Demo 1, or it could contain like cargo storage. Basically, we tried to design something that was as flexible as possible.
Yeah, okay. So I have a little thing here, and you can see this is the same exact type of thing. What they have here is an alarm system with a control component here, and if they trigger it, the alarm goes off. But you can walk up to these places, you can turn off your power supply, that cuts the line. You can add a battery into it so that it repowers it. You can change up all of the systems through power by just affecting the circuit. And that's kind of the same philosophy that they're trying to put into these outposts on a much larger scale. So you can see they're starting to test that in the engine. They're starting to do that in the background. And while the assets they're putting in the game, they don't work just yet, but that's sort of the plan. That's where they're headed with that kind of stuff.
Like an AA turret like we saw on Demo 1, or it could contain like cargo storage. Basically, we tried to design something that was as flexible as possible.
So here's one of the other things that they got into the game shortly after this demo. Luckily, it wasn't great. I will definitely acknowledge that the looting system and the inventory system were pretty not super fun to use when they first came into the game. And they still have their problems, but it was nice to at least get the feature in there. Xfinity, thank you for the super chat over there on YouTube. Appreciate you. Destiny 3 looking real good, like the FPS style. Man, imagine if Bungie was able to do the FPS for Star Citizen, though. That'd be sick. They do some good stuff. They're not quite at their Halo days, but their FPS is top class.
How they want to approach the problem, and then also encourages them to look around and see if the designers have placed different things that they can interact with or use to help get past a certain route or a certain way that they maybe didn't bring with them.
And we'll also be including the, I believe in 315, the Knickknacks app for your Mobiglass. So now that you aren't carrying everything on your body and it's not sort of universal inventory, you'll be able to consult this app to see kind of where stuff is being stored and keep it better organized and stuff like that.
So here, this allows the player to have a quick little puzzle, but just gives them a little bit more interaction, and then allows them to go on to what I would consider a tertiary route, versus climbing up the ladder and possibly having to deal with the AI or them being spotted by them. Also, I think the team did a great job on the planet as well as the outpost. These are really fun to play and sneak around in, and allows for many possible ways of attacking the same problem.
What we're seeing here is
I certainly don't use Knickknacks. Knickknacks is terrible.
These, rooftop storage modules, and it's given like the highest point in the base. So from here, you can actually make probably the most informed decisions on.
God, I love this. This is just. This is the worst.
Routine here.
Just throw this can. Go ahead.
And then ultimately, throwing an item to distract the guard.
Oh God! Could you imagine being that guard and seeing an empty soda can just like fly out of nowhere and hit the ground and be like, a soda can. Instead of like being like, I don't know, where'd that come from?
We're still working out, but at least we're seeing like the first iterations and be able to continue to optimize it as well as make sure that the behavior is working properly.
So we just saw that for the first time. It's like the first rooftop airlock hatch. So previously, route in and out, if the outside wasn't pressurized, we wouldn't have this option. But now through that rooftop airlock, you can cycle and then infiltrate through the roof. And also what we're seeing here is potentially scouting out an advanced traversal up into the rafters, getting on top of some infrastructure and getting like.
So again, this is something that they've tied to Pyro, kind of like these outposts and other locations, but alternative alternative ways to get around areas isn't necessarily a Pyro feature. It's not necessarily going to set Pyro apart. It is nice to see that being developed into locations now, but not necessarily a Pyro thing. And honestly, we're going to actually skip the rest of this because we are a little short on time. Let's take a look at the space station. So this is another part of the game that's going to be wildly different, I think, from Stanton, in that you're not just going to go to any old space station and get what you need. You're going to have to pay attention to where you're headed and make sure not to go to the wrong places or do the wrong things.
And for simplicity, I'll just turn it on. So as I mentioned,
and this isn't really a showcase. This is more just a dev showing how they work on these things, but I thought you guys might want to see a little bit of the visuals behind these places.
Moving elements within the scene. So we're going to go in and add a little bit of VFX. So this is adding in just like some heat haze, a little bit of steam and whatnot. These effects right now are just like the placeholder effects like we were talking about before with the rain. They're just to sell the intent to the VFX team and at least have something in there to show the directors in reviews. And then ultimately when this gets pushed into production and the VFX guys come in, they'll make, actually good looking particle effects or use existing ones they may already have that I don't know about and make it look spicy. So we've got that in here. We've got more fire happening. I think in some places we have the occasional spark, I think down here. Yep. So we've got some of these cables shorting out or whatnot. It's not very well made. That's the idea, right? Is that these things are so, you look at it, you're just like, I ain't touching that. That's the vibe we're after. So we've gone in and we've done a whole bunch of that. Now, the other thing that we need to look at is, and this is a concept that we really introduced and doubled down on for Origin, and that is the moving and dynamic objects within the environment, right? So on Origin, I personally worked on the industrial platform, Providence platform, and on that one, we played around with two animations. So we have the crane animation, which moves cargo around the platform, and we also have the engine display where it explodes out and tells you about the engine and stuff like that, right? That sort of stuff is super important to sell the life of an environment. And we learn a lot doing those on Origin. Unfortunately for Pyro, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have, an engine display exploding or a crane moving around cargo, at least in this specific setting. So the route that we've actually gone down with introducing a lot more movement within our scenes in that regard is through the physics within the scene, right? So on Origin, we played a lot around with cloth. That was like the first time that we really got proper amounts of physicalized cloth within the game itself. And here we're pretty much achieving or trying to achieve the next level of that, right? It's just not just the occasional flag everywhere. It's like how many of these surfaces can we physicalize in an environment at the same time, right? The answer is not all of them, as you probably would suspect, but we're trying to figure out how much we can get away with within the space itself. And on top of that, we also have cables. So we're bringing in, this is the first time that we're bringing in.
And there, my friends, is the difference between Stanton and Pyro. It's the cables hanging from the ceiling. You can't get them anywhere else.
As a player as well.
Get your cables here. Come on, get your cables.
I don't want it to crash while I was explaining it. So I'm going to turn it on now. Fingers crossed it doesn't crash. So there we go. So one of the reasons that we're going in and doing all of this stuff in pre-production, right, is that we want to figure out where the limits lie before we start making guarantees and cash and checks with directors and stuff like that, right? So when we're looking at like specifically the physics stuff, part of that is the expense of it. How much can we get away with within the environment itself? And also just the general stability of it within the environment, right? So as you can see in the center top screen, the cable here is not behaving itself very well. So this is like an issue that we need to identify, right? Is that an issue with the physics system, with the rope itself? Is there some sort of instability on the back end that we need to address? Is it something that I've done wrong, right? In this instance, I'm almost certain it's something I've done wrong. So that's actually good.
All right, one last look at this. This is, I think, gives you the best idea of kind of what we're actually looking at. If you go from up here, you can recognize the space station, right? This looks a lot like the rest stops from Stanton. the food courts and gallerias that you go to. You get these hallways, you get the stores on the sides, you get a hallway in the middle with stores on the sides down there, but you can see that it's completely redone. Different vibes, obviously. There's no there's no HVAC systems here, as you can see. You're breathing in other people's sweat. Armed guards or gang members, whatever you want to call them, and just a lot more freeform and disheveled. And we've seen a lot of this kind of stuff. I'm showing you guys like glimpses of the things they've talked about when it comes to this stuff, but there's a lot more kind of nuance to these stations in that the heat systems don't function correctly. A lot of these places you have to do proper exploration to find some of these back alleys in the space stations that might have honestly nothing, but at least provide extra spaces that we don't usually get in these other space stations. It's not a big thing. This doesn't really tell us much. It's more just, again, emphasizing the difference in these locations between Pyro and Stanton. And all we can see from here is that the locations are more dirty. This is another look at that, actually. And this is all happening in 2022 now, so we've jumped forward another year here.
Really advanced traversal opportunities for some of the outlaw space stations currently being built for the Pyro system. If you remember the most recent CitizenCon demo, advanced traversal are ways to get around or through an environment beyond the critical path most people usually stick to. Now, by following a variety of indicators still being developed, including simple things like tracing the path of an unusual cable or scratch marks on the floor, the players can discover these advanced traversal paths designed to lead not just to interesting tactical opportunities, but special loot and content rewards for those who spend a little extra time exploring. As for everything else you're seeing here, this is still very much a work in progress, with only the earliest of lighting, texture, and prop passes being complete. But it's a neat look at how these stations are pushing not just into new dynamics visually, but a universe of possibility for additional exploration as well. And like with the outposts you saw at CitizenCon, they won't be assembled the same way each and every time, so you can never be too certain what's around any corner.
I actually liked the subtle scrape marks on the ground to show you can move that box. I hope they leave it like that and it's not super obvious. There's no it's just, you have to keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. But yeah, these space stations come off more as locations for exploration and like less of a safe haven from the other space stations. Next, we're going to look at some narrative stuff again. I think here they're going to talk a little bit about the dangers of Pyro. We'll touch on this for about 5 to 7 minutes. Like I said, I'm pushing my limit here because I got to get going for an interview in a little bit here. But let's take a look and hear what they have to say about Pyro from the narrative perspective.
Ninetales currently is Stanton-based. That's their main headquarters. They're operating out of Grimhex. So that's kind of the distinction. There might eventually be some crossover, but like at the start, we really wanted Pyro to kind of give you a unique feeling you're going in. It's kind of only our second system. So I think to start, hopefully you're running into kind of unique outlaw groups when you're there versus what you've already been encountering in the Stanton system. And then, as the game progresses and stuff, we might have more bleeding over where outlaw groups are doing more runs like the Xeno Threat has been doing into the various systems and more cross-system missions and crimes and stuff.
That's not to say that Xeno Threat is the only gang in Pyro. We did an SCL, which is this show, last year, I think, dedicated entirely to the gangs of Pyro, where Will and Dave were on. We discussed several of the gangs, not all of them, and even created a new one live during the stream. So
I think it was the Fire Rats.
The Fire Rats.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, there's a bunch of gangs that have been for Pyro that have been established internally that we're working on. So yeah, Ninetales used to be in their lore, used to operate in a bunch of different systems, and they have recently consolidated and just been based in Grimhex and doing their operations out of there. Why they're doing that, no one's quite sure. But yeah, so that's where they're centered from, and Pyro is Xeno Threat main territory right now, and then all these other gangs that we've been kind of starting to think about and flesh out. So yeah, it'll be diversity of gangs to meet while there.
And where was it? Some Bobby Wan in chat says, I think the Overlords are a Pyro gang, and well, the Overlords are vigilantes. It's
But yeah, Overlords too. Yeah, they're part of the mix of whatever is happening there. No one's quite sure exactly what their intentions are, but yeah.
The Overlords are special to me because I got to contribute like this much to it. Like this thing.
And then we got Citizens for Pyro in the mix, which is a fun development that was written about in a recent, very nice Observist. So read about them there.
No, tell us now.
Sherry, I should tell you that when you do the text in the Zoom, it shows up on the stream.
Oh.
So everybody knows your Ranta drawing is done. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead. And,
all right, hold on.
Just start a screen share.
Okay. 1 second.
Be careful. There's nothing else on your screen.
I hope it's wildly inappropriate, Sherry.
It's super inappropriate. You're gonna be disgusted.
Send messages through Teams from now on. Oh,
here you go.
Lord. Okay, here we go.
There you go. That's canon, folks.
And where does the dung come from?
The butt.
Mouth.
Right here. There you go.
Thank you.
That's poop.
Poop comes from the butt.
It comes from the butt. Hold on, let me just.
Okay, that has nothing to do with Pyro. Narrative team always gets distracted.
Or the other planets of Nyx.
Yeah, there should be. In our recent lore makers, we do every quarter, so for a year we go through our Ask a Dev and we answer a bunch of questions. And one of the ones from the recent one was about Nyx and about basically settlements outside of Delamar and Levski. And obviously there's going to be other places that we're going to want you to go in system. And one of the groups we talked about there was a group called the Moraine, which will have.
All right, I was hoping to actually be able to get more info about the gangs here, but because we're running short, I don't have the time to search around for it. Sorry about that, guys. My apologies. But I will show you some of the planets. So here are the different planets in Pyro, if you were wondering. Of course, again, this isn't what separates Pyro from Stanton. We're still waiting for more news on that. Generally, because the narrative team can't come in and do that stuff until everybody else has completed their work. And in the monthly reports, we've been seeing that narrative's getting more involved. But they haven't shared with us what they're doing. They're working a lot on missions, mission givers, NPC populations, and the actual laws of the system put forth by the gangs. I don't know if they're called laws if gangs make them, but that's the kind of stuff they're working on. And this was a look at the narrative team from, I think, 22. Yeah, September 2022. I think they mostly were having fun with it. I don't think they give too many crucial details, but definitely go check that out if you want to learn more about the backstory of Pyro, because they do give some decent details here. But here are a couple looks at the systems. I'll jump around here, or the planets. I will jump around here to make sure you guys get a good look at each of the planets and each of the planets that they show. So it's not glowing, but you can still see a lot of the blue coming in. Yeah, as you can see, Pyro 1 already has some volumetric clouds. Not all of the Pyro planets have their volumetric clouds yet. So let's jump to one of the blue spots on the planet. I just tweaked like the sun position a little bit to make it look a bit nicer. And then you can see why it's blue. We added like tons of these crystals to Pyro 1. We've used crystals before on Wala, but I think we were a bit too, we played it a bit too safe on Wala. I think we only put like crystals as ground cover assets. But for Pyro 1, we really wanted to push the shapes. So you can find like these really large crystals here. Heisenberg would be really happy here. Okay, then another interesting thing to highlight here, plans over there. So what's interesting about those is we made them like 3 or 4 years ago. They were supposed to be part of like a mission on a space station. The mission was scrapped, unfortunately, and ever since then, this asset set has just been sitting in our like vault. It's a really cool plan set, and I'm happy that we finally found a spot to use them. Okay, but can I harvest the leaves? This is another spot I want to highlight.
It's also important for us that we do add something memorable to each planet. In the case of Pyro 1, it's this spiky rock set that looks really intimidating. We tried to push the scale of the assets for the Pyro system. We felt like by now we got like the basic rocks and the scattering of the basic rocks to like a very good quality. So now we can explore more crazy shapes, I guess. And this is one of the sets that we made. It's not done yet. It still needs a polish.
If there's one thing about Pyro that's definitely different, it's you can tell how much further their Planet Tech team has gotten in that, like when they were doing their work for Stanton, they were kind of building it out. One of the major reasons we didn't get a lot of ground locations and outposts earlier on is because every time they had to restart, or every time they updated the planets or updated the game every quarter, it would reset the topography of the planets, which obviously caused a lot of trouble for locations. They would end up underground. That was because the Planet Tech team hadn't completed the planet creation technology. Now that they have, we're starting to see them do a lot more things like polish that's actually making planets different. Massive structures, rivers, lakes. The water simulation is coming along stronger. The clouds are getting better. You can definitely tell that they reached this initial point and now they're starting to add more and more on. And I think the planets in Pyro really make that very apparent, as you'll see with some of these other planets and moons that have like really, really huge scaled features and constructs on the surface. And here is remember that old planet that we looked at in the very beginning of the stream? This one is the same one, updated, looking much better.
The terrain to the geometry, and then also have like the rocks form in a natural way. Now we can make nicer rock formations. It's not quite there yet. There are still improvements planned for it, but I think in comparison to what we had before, this is a big step forward. Also, what you might see is the drawing distance of assets has been greatly improved. So everything you see here in the distance is actual geometry. So if we were to fly all the way over there, you will see that this is like cliff formations. And I think it looks really cool, like the silhouette of the terrain. Yeah, let's fly through the canyons. Yeah, I would do this in a spaceship, but I'm horrible at flying, so I'm just going to use the camera in editor. So now I jumped ahead to a really cool biome on Pyro 2. It's simple, but I think sometimes less is more. In this case, what sets this biome apart from the rest of the planet is that we added these calcified trees, and they spawn in very dense clusters. So you almost get like little forests of them. So it's supposed to look very dry and kind of dead, but still in a...
I freaking love the colors of this place.
You find like lots of foliage
just
here.
Beautiful.
We have like these cliffs in the background, which are pretty dark. And it's another nice contrast of this planet where you have like the saturated red terrain and the dark bedrock. So jumping to this point here, what I want to highlight...
Then the one we all know pretty well, Pyro 3, I believe it is.
A lot of time and effort was spent on making the moss look just right.
Xfinity, thank you for the super chats, by the way. You're beautiful.
And density, so it looks really nice when it like covers these rocks. And then we also have like lots of smaller moss on the ground. We combine it with like yellow grass. And it makes for like a really interesting biome. So it was really important for us to make this biome look really dense. So we pushed the amount of assets that we're using. So it's basically completely covered in foliage compared to...
And then now we get to see where those large rock structures went.
Gave us
Pyro 4.
Really interesting concept art, because this is easily some of the biggest rock formations that we have in the game so far. Actually, let me try to fly a ship so you can see the scale of them. So they're massive in scale. And what was the hardest part about getting these to look right is that they're supposed to look really good from a distance, because you would expect something this big, yeah, to be visible almost from space. But then the tricky thing is also to make them look good.
Look at that
when
one in
you're
the
standing
distance.
up close to
Gosh,
them.
I don't know what
Let
it
me
is
jump
about that.
in-game so you
This shot
look
just
good,
gets me.
when you're standing up close to them. Let me jump in game so you see how big these rocks actually are. So they are massive in scale. You can probably land your spaceship on them and walk on them, and they make you feel like really small. But I think it's a really good visual that you have these like dark gray rocks against the crimson of the soil and the individual craters, which are a whole height crater region. On other planets we have individual craters which are a whole height map, or like 3-4 smaller craters on one height map, but this is actually multiple height maps forming one large crater, and you can see it all the way out in space. Like this whole region is one big crater, so it's a mix of like the global displacement texture and then the height maps of the ecosystems spawning on top.
All right, so that's Pyro 4. It's got a really cool feature like that. And then the moon from Pyro 5, because Pyro 5 is a gas giant. They haven't really shown it to us yet, except for in a couple shots. But one of the moons has this really cool planetary feature as well.
That you can see from space. In this case, it's not a crater, but it's like, yeah, like a long streak of slick obsidian. So let's fly down to the surface of the streak and have a look what it looks like from up close. Again, we start with like the global height map where there's like a little bit of a bump up, and then it goes down to form the crack, and then we scatter the ecosystem height maps on top to get the look that we want. So if we go down here, you can see we start with like flatland shapes, some smaller craters, and then
all right, I don't really have time to show you Pyro 6, so we're just going to do a little
seeing what I showed
sizzle reel here at the end to give you a look at all the stuff they just showed. pretty. It's pretty. All right, I've got like minutes here left. So before I go, here are
Drilling
a look. Oh,
and,
Jesus. This is a look at the underground facilities. They introduced these in concept form almost a year ago now. And they've made some pretty decent progress on them compared to, I think, what people were kind of expecting. They've gotten them in game in kind of a gray box stage. These are much, much larger underground facilities that are meant to not necessarily replace the bunkers we have right now. Clearly, they are too large to replace them, but supplement them. They are meant to be a more structured form of underground facilities. Honestly, don't really make much sense in Pyro at this size. I think they've mentioned that sometimes a company will build one of these as sort of a stop-off point because there is a popular trade route that goes through Pyro from Terra. So it does make kind of sense for a company like Bering or Shubin to have a facility like this in Pyro, but these are locations that won't come until we do get Pyro, and I think at that point they'll be retroactively added to Stanton, and we'll see them in other locations like Terra and Magnus. But they're intricate areas. They have multiple layers. You have the sort of lobby layer that's above the ground that will have probably a place where you might be able to meet with an NPC or even buy something, maybe get some sort of support. I'm not entirely sure, but as you go down, you can go underground into these areas that are more industrial. And they've already started to talk about the missions that will be included here, data heist missions in which you'll have to go in, hack into a terminal, hold off enemy forces, and try to send that data out of the area to another location to get paid. So they've got some ideas and plans for these locations, but generally these are going to be kind of like dungeons in Star Citizen. These are meant to be areas that will host a multitude of missions or loot or things to find. I'm sure they will have derelict versions of these where they're kind of abandoned and there's less people there, but they also have these ones that are more focused on the folks who are working there. And just like space stations, they'll probably have different versions of these for different uses. But as he explores around, you can just kind of get an idea of how expansive it is and what they might be used for. But that about wraps it up, folks. So thank you all for joining me for this look at Pyro. I'm sorry we had to cut it a little bit short. We could probably do another one of these in a couple of months with some more information. But for now, that about does it, my friends.